What up, what up, what up, Clock Dodgers? It is your boy, Neal. You are listening to the Clock Dodgers podcast. Welcome back. I appreciate you for joining me. If you're new here, let's get familiar. The Clock Dodgers podcast is a podcast that really, we talk about anything, whether it's fantasy football, whether it's entertainment, whether it's culture, whether it's comedy, music. I mean, we go all across the board, right? This episode happens to be fantasy football, which we do pretty often, fairly often, right? It's something we love. So the guest on the show today is Kevin. You may know him as the fantasy football engineer. If you don't know him, that's what he goes by. You can follow him on Twitter. You're going to hear all the things to follow him and how to support him in the podcast. But of course, I like to send it to you guys as well beforehand. So this way you can go ahead and check out the guy if you don't know, if you're not familiar with him. So at _FF_engineer. He's an underscore kind of guy. Go check him out. He's a writer for DLF Football or DL Football, Dynasty League Football. And then, of course, he has his own podcast, which is the Fantasy Football Engineering Podcast. So these things are all things I ask you to please hit him up, follow him, support him, subscribe to his podcast, do all that kind of stuff. You'll hear in the episode he's a cool guy, really smart dude, knows his stuff. So it was fun to, to get the fantasy football stuff in depth right before the preseason kicks off. If you're listening to this episode when it drops, there's actually football today. If you're listening to it after the fact, you may have already watched the game. Who knows? But it doesn't matter. The content was great. He did not shy away from anything. He gave it. He gave some great advice. So shout out to Kevin again for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Great dude. It was a fun chat. Before I get into the conversation, I just want to, of course, remind you guys that, one, the charity league sponsored by Official Fantasy Ranks has been filled. Thank you again to everybody who hit me up. If you didn't make the cut, of course, there's more leagues coming hopefully soon. But that one is one for the ring, the charity league. I'll send out more details as soon as I have them available. Those who are in, I will be hitting up shortly to let you know that you are officially in and you don't have to worry about it no more. But yeah, that is done with. I am proud and honored and happy to say that No Halftime, the daily fantasy sports app, is back as a sponsor of the Clock Dodgers podcast. They've been sponsoring this podcast since day one, it feels like. Literally, they believed in what we were doing very early on. They were the first sponsor to believe in what we're doing. So I'm always going to rock with No Halftime. You guys know that. You guys have supported No Halftime immensely. You guys have been beneficial to the sponsorship, to the family that we got here. No Halftime is family. They are extended family of the Clock Dodgers podcast. There's no question. Those who enjoyed it last year know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a lot of money to be won on No Halftime. There's a lot of fun to be had, and it's a unique, setup. It's daily fantasy sports, player versus player action. I'll get into more things that are coming with the No Halftime sponsorship because there's some fun stuff. But I don't want to give it to you till it's all ironed out. So hopefully by the next podcast, I will have more details on that. But again, honored, excited to be sponsored by No Halftime again, to have joined it with these guys again. They're a great group of people. From the top to the bottom, customer service, the platform itself, they're constantly, improving the system. And again, we had so much fun last year with it. So much fun. So all I ask is that you join me again for that. Before you go there and sign up, just wait. Hold off on that if you haven't signed up already, because I have a promo code coming and some fun stuff. So if you sign up before that, you're not going to get, be a part of the fun. You just got to wait till I have that promo code for you, which hopefully is next episode. And I'll have more details as far as what you get when using that promo code. But just bear with me. If you haven't signed up, just bear with me. If you have signed up, you guys know how it is. You know how the Clock Dodger family works. Tell your friends, tell your family. Why be greedy and hold these things to yourself? You know what I mean? But just wait again until I have that promo code. I just wanted to tell you guys. So exciting stuff are coming with No Halftime and Clock Dodgers. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I don't want to hold you up anymore from the episode with Kevin. So I'm going to go ahead and let this thing rip. And then we will we'll chat on the other end. All right. So hang with me on the other end. And we'll get into some other business. Enjoy the conversation, guys.
Cannot play with him. Cannot win with him. Cannot coach with him. Can't do it.
You play to win the game.
I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Touchdown!
You are now locked in to the Clock Dodgers podcast.
Clock Dodgers Podcast.
Hey, Kevin, how's life on your side of town, man?
Things are great, man. Thanks for having me on the podcast. Really appreciate giving me the opportunity to join you. It's a fun podcast, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming on. I'm glad we got to have this this chat right now because we're right before the NFL season starts, the preseason, I should say. We've been kind of talking and planning this for a while, but this is a perfect time because a lot of people are having, questions and debates and things they're still kind of tossing around, but we're getting close to a lot of people's, live drafts where they have offline drafts and, drafts in their people's houses and at restaurants. So we're getting close to that time where those kind of things are starting to go down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, definitely.
So I'm happy. I got a lot of questions here from listeners. A lot of fun stuff to get into. Before we get into the football side of things, though, I did want to talk to you about your podcast for a second. You're 18 episodes in. Am I right?
Yep, just hit 18 episodes released with Ryan McDowell.
Right. So yeah, you're 18 episodes deep. So the podcast is new in a sense, right? I mean, it's fairly new. You started it this offseason, correct?
Yeah, it just started end of April around draft time.
Okay. So, when I was, of course, I always ask for, questions on Twitter and things like that. And I had this question in mind anyway, but I did want to shout out Michael Stepney really quick for also sending the question my way. But we were kind of curious, what made you start a podcast? Like, why now? What occurred to kind of make this happen?
Yeah, so I listen to a ton of podcasts. My work kind of allows me to write some code and always listening throughout the day at work, and then sometimes at night I'll listen to a couple as well. So there's so many interviews with great minds that I've heard, and I would want to reach through my iPhone listening to the interviews and wait a minute, slow down, that's gold what you just talked about, and they would run by the topic. So I had the urge to interview people and ask different questions that I thought weren't getting answered. And I felt there was a lot of knowledge and brilliance that you could pick from these guys' brains. So these bright minds of the not only fantasy football, but I had Andrew Brandt on, who is Business of Sports. He does a podcast, Business of Sports, Monday Morning Quarterback kind of thing. So he's salary cap expert. And then
right.
I had a couple different people. I have had Manish Mehta, who's Jets beat writer. Kind of, all different walks of life. I'm gonna have Peter Jennings, co-founder of Fantasy Labs, coming up next week, talking about how I can apply DFS to Dynasty Football. And so I just want to pull all these minds, and I felt like I could bring something unique to the table.
Right, for sure. I mean, yeah, you definitely have a good lineup of people that you've had on so far. And when I had JJ on last week, we kind of spoke about fantasy football. There's a lot right now. There's a lot of content, whether it's written or in podcast form. But what do you feel is separating your podcast from others? Like, why should people come to your podcast? What are you doing differently? I know you mentioned you slow things down a little bit. Do you feel like you're asking different questions, or just kind of hitting on certain points that maybe others are leaving out, or what is it?
Yeah, so for me, I just wanted to be able to pull, maybe go in a little bit, take a deeper dive in the thought process behind, either if someone's doing projections. I didn't want to just talk about the projections. I kind of wanted to get and capture their frame of mind. What are the things that they're focused on when they're developing their projections? Are they looking at training camp reports? Are they looking at volume of offense? Are they looking at all of it? Are they looking at strength of schedule? I wanted to know what their mindset was when they do that. So, and that applies for if I pick somebody like Rich Rebar, where I think he's an excellent drafter, both redraft and dynasty. I think he drafts really well. So I'll pick his brain and, how do you draft, man? How do you build your rosters, dissimilar players, those kind of things. And then I wanted to pick brains a little bit deeper and not only player A versus B.
Right, gotcha. So what have and this may be hard to answer. I don't know, but what have you learned from having your own podcast and speaking to these guys directly? Different from just listening to them on other people's podcasts. Have you seen a different side of things or of people? I mean, is there something different you're picking up now that you're doing them?
Just I guess to put it simply, I didn't. It's kind of obvious, but you don't really realize it until you talk to these guys. Is that they all just love talking football. I mean, at the core of it, they're fans of this game. They're fans of the NFL, and they really do like just talking about it, whether it's hot mic or not. I was on a podcast recently, and I told the guys. They were thanking me for coming on. And I said, heck, I would have done this if you didn't hit record, just like let's have a Google Hangout and talk about football. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I just enjoy talking about football. So going through this, I guess when I came into it, I was a little intimidated to have guys like Evan Silva and JJ, who I've looked up too long, Sigmund Bloom, all these guys, Andrew Brandt, guys that I've kind of looked up to and thought they're like quote unquote celebrities, right? And I'm just another guy, I'm a fan that started writing and sharing knowledge and things like that on Twitter. And I don't think anything great of myself. So I was pretty intimidated to ask these guys to come on. But now that I have, I realize they're just guys that like to talk football.
Yeah, absolutely.
People. We're just football fans,
Right, for sure. And, me and you have spoken before about, you being a family guy. I'm a family guy. We have, jobs, kids, all these things. But, with Clock Dodgers, I always try to, kind of motivate people and tell them, to chase your passions and things that you want to do outside of, those 9 to 5 schedules and whatnot. A lot of times people will tell you, I can't find the time, in regards to outside of their normal stuff that they're already doing. So for people who want to write or want to podcast or want to do whatever, has nothing even nothing to do in this industry at all. As a guy who's juggling all those things yourself, what do you say to those people?
Yeah, you got to commit to yourself whether you want to have a hobby or not. And I think a hobby is pretty important and just for your mental capacity. You're dealing with either family or work or life. I think there's an outlet. Some people play video games. Some people go to a bar with their friends a couple times a night. For me, it's fantasy football. And I didn't have such a desire to write necessarily. I had a desire to learn more about this hobby and spend more time in it. So, and then once you just dedicate yourself to having a hobby, it becomes you got to carve out some time for yourself to do it. And,
right.
I'm probably more on the degenerate side where I'm like, on my phone at work at lunchtime, on Twitter almost all day long, hitting up even 5 minutes here and there, catching up on news, reading an article every chance I get. One of the first guys he used to write for DLF, and then he was with UTH for a little while, Doug Veach. I remember hearing him on a podcast and him saying, if you really want to write for this or you want to get better at fantasy, you got to take every opportunity. And I started laughing so hard when he said on a podcast that, that time you're taking a dump is valuable time, man. Yeah. Either watch a video of a draft of a rookie player or read an article in that time you're sitting on the pod or something. You got to make time everywhere you can, yeah. Right? So that's kind of my approach, is that any chance I get, I try to do it. And then in terms of writing and podcasting, I try to do it after kids are going to sleep. So wife is usually sleeping by 10, usually start recording 10:30, editing and all that. So I'm losing a bit of sleep there. Some nights I don't go to bed till 2 a.m., but that's when I fit it in.
Yeah, that's part of the process. I love it, man. Now, you have a decent, we mentioned you have a decent set of episodes already under your belt, even though it's fairly new. You've talked to a lot of big guys. You have a lot of content already there. I always like to ask this, with people who come on the podcast, no matter what they're doing, really it doesn't matter what walk of life they're coming from, but what is your goal moving forward with your show? I mean, are you just happy where it's at and you're just looking to keep talking to people and connecting with people? Like you said, you don't mind just talking about football even if you're not recording, or are you trying to make something of it, even bigger and better, and just kind of keep expanding on it? Everyone has different, obviously, like you said, hobbies and goals, but I'm just curious what yours is with it.
Yeah, I think I'll let it take its life of its own kind of thing. Where I'm enjoying what it is now. I started independent, but then Dynasty League Football just took me on. So I'm part of their family of podcasts now. And I'll just let it take me where it goes, just keep interviewing people, tying it back all into Dynasty. I think there's a ton of ways that we can approach Dynasty fantasy football, from Devi, IDP, straight auction, complicated salary cap leagues. So many different facets to Dynasty fantasy football, and I can pull from so many different angles, DFS, redraft, football guys, just regular people. And
Right.
whether it's beat writers or anything, I'll keep interviewing those people and keep tying it together, that how to build Dynasty fantasy football rosters, because that's a 365 endeavor. We never stop building Dynasty teams. So I'll just keep pounding that. And then as far as how big it gets, it doesn't really interest me. It's kind of more, like I said, a hobby, and I hope people get something out of it.
Right.
So if it stays small, it stays small. It's fine with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not making this a full-time job. I'm a semiconductor test engineer, and I love my day job. It's really fun. I get to code. I get to develop hardware. I process a ton of data. I do like my job quite a bit. So I'm not looking to quit my day job and make this full-time,
Right.
But I just enjoy the hobby.
That's awesome, man. Well, you're doing a good job so far, and making a lot of good connections. So as long as you're having fun, man, that's all that matters with it. But obviously, a lot of people, they see your name on the episode. They know football season is about to come. So let's talk about some football, Kevin. I thought about a few different ways to approach the football side of this conversation, because we've received a lot of questions, and I don't really like to leave questions out. So when I get a lot of questions, I try my hardest to fit them in, to the episode that people are giving them for. Sometimes I have to float them around to different episodes, but I want to try to get as many of the clock dodgers out there who sent in questions. I want to make sure we get to those. But before we do that, I wanted to kind of try something with you. I want to throw, ADP out the window. I want to throw out, your roster and what it looks like out the window. I want to throw the league scoring out the window. I just want to know players that you love or like, or however you want to look at it, when not considering all those variables, right? So I want to kind of just throw some names at you and just tell me, whether you like the guy, you're going to draft him more often than not, or if you're not normally going to, land on this guy. I'm going to throw like 5, 6, 7 names at you. And I just want to see kind of where you're at with him. Okay.
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So the first name I want to throw at you is Ty Montgomery.
Our first reaction is meh. I put this on Twitter recently, is that he doesn't excite me. He's probably going to be like your RB2 on your roster, redraft anyway. And it seems like a high price to expect for a top, maybe 15, 20 is probably his ceiling. I would say top 15 running back is probably his ceiling. Mm-hmm. And then you're paying right around there. So it's not like you're going to get huge upside. It's not like you can get someone like a Gurley who might be RB2 or a second round pick, and then you're going to get him, he's going to jump up and be like possibly a top 12.
Right.
So you're kind of buying at his cost. You're buying at his ceiling. So the best you can do is kind of hit at value. So that doesn't really excite me that much. So I'm probably passing for the other option that's on the table at the time.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to say I'm passing on Ty Montgomery. But, people that like him, I don't argue it.
Right.
You like him, you like him. I'm not against him necessarily. Like, I think Crowell's getting overdrafted, so I'd be avoiding Crowell. But for Ty Montgomery, if you like him, grab him. And the one thing I like about Ty Montgomery that I wouldn't argue against is that I like buying running backs with great offenses, because they're always going to be near the end zone, and that touchdown swing can really make your certainly win weekly, but it can make your roster for the season.
Right. So you're not crazy about them either way. So you're not going to argue it either way, but you do see a little bit of the upside, basically.
That's it. Meh is my that's my real reaction. It's not like I'm against him or for him. I'm not excited to draft him, but I'm not exactly gonna get too heated trying to talk you out of him.
Gotcha. The next guy I want to throw at you, Devontae Parker.
This is a tough one because I love the player. I love the talent. I love them coming out. I really like them in Dynasty. But it's just when you look up that volume of offense, Tannehill maybe 400, 450 pass attempts on the high side. I don't think he hits 500 this year. And then when you divvy up all the targets, you probably got Landry as a safe floor where he is. And then you probably got, say, 250 PPR points to go between Stills and Parker. And even if you get a 60-40 split from Parker to Stills, you're really not getting that much of a wide receiver. You're talking top maybe 48 at 150, fantasy points.
Right.
There's just the volume's not there for all three of them. And Landry is probably the safest floor to get his targets. I mean, it would really take something like Tannehill and Parker click, and Parker becomes this down the field threat that, Tannehill breaks the mold of what he's been. He'd have to have like a Matt Ryan type season where, Matt Ryan had like 6 years or 7 years of being this mediocre quarterback. And then last year he kind of, sprung up and had these fantastic like TD ratio, pass attempts per touchdown ratio. And Tannehill would have to have some kind of year like that for Parker to really excel, barring anything, injury for Stills or something like that, where then you only have two of those guys. But it's a hard path to kind of draw for Parker to actually hit.
Right.
I think his ADP is like wide receiver 37. If he was wide receiver, say 40, 48, then you're drafting him as your wide receiver 4 maybe. I could see that a little bit better, and then his upside is wide receiver 3. But at wide receiver 37 in PPR in the 8th round, that seems rich, man. I'm going for Cobb, Decker, Macklin, Garcon, Sanders over him.
Gotcha. So just another guy that you are typically liking what's around him more.
More, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
For sure.
The next one is a quarterback that some people just feel is a value at where he's going. Some people just hate the guy. I don't like him at all. I'm not a fan. I will not draft him regardless of where he's at pretty much. But Blake Bortles, man.
Yeah, I kind of pounded this a little too hard on Twitter. He's like probably quarterback 20 range, quarterback 20 something. So I'm taking him at that value because I think that his floor is QB 24, but I think his ceiling can be QB 8. So, kind of this, there's a higher upside than there is a floor. So if his floor completely gives out, he's going to be like 3 or 4 QB spots off of where you took him. But the high upside is that you basically draft him as a QB2 and as a backup in one quarterback leagues, and you can probably get him really late. And he'll give you these weeks where good matchup or something like that, where he can really hit a pretty good ceiling. So I'm a buyer in Bortles, and I try to be agnostic to what kind of quarterback he is. I don't think the Jaguars, they could win 4 games and he could still be a QB1.
Right.
He could still be a top 8, 10 quarterback, and he still be a bad quarterback. And kind of to support that, one thing that I challenge people, I actually talked to Sigmund Bloom when he was on my podcast about this, is that they didn't even draft Peterman. They didn't draft anybody behind him. And I think there's only like maybe Chad Henne behind him. So I don't think they're going to replace him in season. So at QB 22 or something, you'd have to really argue that he's going to lose his job mid-season not to be worth that price.
Right.
And I don't see that happening.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I mean, it's not losing your job. That part is interesting. Obviously, I've heard all kinds of arguments, and you have people who just, don't believe in his talent. They feel like the garbage time aspect of him will go away this year a little bit because of the running game and the defense and stuff like that. So we'll see how it plays out. But the not being replaced in season thing is a thought for sure. Coming off of Blake Bortles, I actually got a question from a gentleman at Swagzilla on the Fantasy Life app, and he mentioned Allen Robinson and Marquise Lee. He was mentioning how, I guess more so how they ended the season last year, and he doesn't understand if we're giving Allen Robinson too much credit, if we're not giving Lee enough credit. Because if you look at, depending on different scoring formats, obviously they're going to vary all over the place. But just in your typical like PPR scoring, I want to say they finished within like 25 points of each other or something, Lee and him. Do you think, and obviously if we are talking ADP and stuff, they're drastically apart. What do you take from that? Do you think that the Lee situation is not repeatable? Do you think that Allen Robinson is that much better, really? Or do you think that no one's paying attention to Lee and they should be?
I kind of feel both. I think that maybe it was 2 years ago when Robinson was pretty good. Hearns actually had a pretty good season. So if the volume's there, which I actually expect it to be, I don't think the Jaguars are going to be this. I don't think they're going to flip their record. I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year. I think that's a little expecting too much out of them. The defense will improve. That was kind of touted last year too, that their defense would improve and that the garbage time was going to go away and that they're going to run the ball more with Ivory and Yeldon. You know, I mean, call me skeptical in terms of this team decreasing the quote-unquote garbage time. So even if the volume goes down a little bit, say it loses like maybe 25%, I still think the efficiency can improve. I think him and Bortles and Robinson just had a misconnection. And I draw this parallel that Winston and Evans had this misconnection. They had this really good year. Then they had a season where they were off, I think 2015. Evans took a dip, and Pro Football Focus tracks like wide receiver rating, which is the quarterback rating to a receiver.
Right.
And Evans dipped quite a bit because Winston threw all of his interceptions like towards Evans' way, and he was just kind of chucking the ball. He was chucking it to Evans, expecting him to come down with it. And I think Bortles did the same thing with Robinson. So I think he was just chucking it and thinking that Robinson was going to run under it and he was going to be the super receiver just to, make the play, right? And he was giving his receiver every benefit of the doubt, whether it was double covered, anything. So I think that chemistry is going to improve there quite a bit. Now, separately on Lee, you brought up Lee, is that I like Lee. I think he's a good receiver. I mean, there's no reason why he can't be a top 36 type receiver.
Yeah, I mean, in redraft, his ADP or something is like in the 200s, isn't it? It's pretty crazy, I think, right? Like it's far out there.
Got it right here. It's pretty low. It's wide receiver 69 in the 14th round.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy. I would take that all day. I mean, I think I looked up his partial. So if you looked at the second half of last year, he was wide receiver 25-ish in PPR. He had a great end of the year. I mean, his knock is just people don't believe that he can stay healthy. He had a lot of hamstring issues. I mean, even the beat writers joke that you're down in Florida. I don't know if you recognize this, but they call him the white albino because they never see him. Because, he's never on the field and he was always hurt. So if he can get that straight and those hamstring things are behind him, there's no reason why he can't be a top 36 wide receiver. Easily outpace that ADP.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how that goes, and if people get the benefit of taking Lee and it really pays off, or if it's just one of those flash seasons. We'll see. But I thought it was an interesting question by him.
Yeah, I think it's people are up in the air with Hearns because Hearns was hurt, so they're kind of thinking one or the other could emerge, but not both. So I think they're both sitting in the 14th round. So it's just flip a coin and people being indecisive which one will emerge or could emerge.
Gotcha. Definitely something to think about. The last name I want to throw at you really quick for this is Amir Abdullah.
I've been on the fence with Amir Abdullah. There's times I really like him, and I'm like, oh, man, everyone should buy him in Dynasty. And then there's times I'm like, if Riddick takes the receiving role, it kind of limits the upside for Abdullah to actually be that relevant. So I go back and forth a little bit on him, but man, every time I put the tape on for Abdullah, I'm so impressed, man. He's got these highlight runs, and just his vision seems above average. His one cut and go speed is just fun to watch. So I get excited the more I watch him, but then I try to pour some cold water on myself and
try to temper it.
Make sure to temper it a little bit because, without the receiving role in PPR, he could get seriously limited, and I don't really see him as a red zone guy. So is the touchdown upside really there to really support him? And even if he gets maybe 900 or 1100 yards, is that enough? Is that enough of a floor with minimal touchdowns and minimal receiving role? It's hard to put him in a top 24 running back category, right?
I mean, do you think in that
I
offense?
have to temper myself because I do like the player.
Do you think in that offense that it's either Riddick as PPR and as the receiver and Abdullah as strictly a runner, or do you feel like there's room for both to catch passes?
Man, when Riddick's on, there's no way they're taking him off the field. I mean, they love him a receiver. I mean, Stafford really has a great connection with him. Even in the red zone, he was getting red zone targets, and people were like pulling their hair out.
Yeah.
Riddick can get 100 targets easy. I think they like him too much in that role. And we joke, but I don't think the Lions got Abdullah in fantasy. They're not going to feed Abdullah just to feed him. They're not looking to get him touches. If they got Riddick and he's excelling in that role, they'll just roll with Riddick in that receiving role. So, yeah, Abdullah can get some passes. There's no question, but how much, right? It's like, I can't picture the ceiling being there. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to my Parker opinion earlier. Is I don't think Abdullah can really take reins on the entire. We look for a number of things. We look for red zone opportunities when we're looking for upside with running backs, particularly. We're looking for touchdown upside, red zone either targets or rushes. We're looking for receiving floor that helps out in PPR, and there's so many red flags where I don't think he can get the red zone opportunities. I don't think he can get significant targets and rushing yards receiving yards, excuse me. So I think he's gonna be more of a flashy running back that won't be even the focal of the offense. So I have to temper my expectations on the opportunity side of it.
Gotcha. And not to mention, they were both hurt last season, so I'm sure the team doesn't want to, run either one of them into the ground anyway.
For sure.
So we'll see. All right, so those are the players that I really wanted to just throw at you really quick, just because I see their names mentioned a lot. I see people with a lot of questions on them. So I was just curious when a lot of things are taken out of the picture, if you just generally like those guys or not. So I appreciate you answering those. What I want to jump over to is, because we got so many of them, is questions from the Clock Dodger family out there, the Clock Dodger listeners. We got a bunch of them. Most of these I pulled from the Fantasy Life app, where we got a pretty strong group on there. So we're going to jump over to those, man. Are you down for that?
Of course, man. Love it.
All right, cool. So let's jump into those. These are kind of all over the place, man. I just pulled a bunch out. If you want to hit some of them longer than others and give more time on it, that's fine. If you just want to run through some, that's also good, because I got about at least probably 10 of them here, so we can try to do it however we see fit here. The first one.
Let's do it.
The first one is from @RTSV, and he says, who leads these teams in targets? The first team is the Bears. The second team is the Rams, and the third team is the Browns.
Man, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel on this one. So Bears, Browns, and what was the third one?
Rams.
Oof, ouch. Yeah, I'm gonna go with off the top of my tongue, I'm thinking it's gonna be the Bears. I think with White and Meredith and the tight ends that they have and Jordan Howard, I think that offense will move a little bit more. So I'm kind of, my go-to cheat on this kind of a question is who can move the sticks? What offense will have the most pieces to be able to move the sticks and get more first downs? Because the more first downs you get, the more plays you get, and the more plays you get, the more pass attempts you'll get. So I'm going to lean Bears on this one. I think the Rams are going to struggle to move the ball. Their receiving options aren't that great. And, the Browns, I think they're in for another dumpster fire year.
Okay. And
I'm not buying the Browns.
On those teams specifically, is there a wide receiver that you could pick from each team that you feel will lead them in targets?
The Rams would be the hardest one of those, so let's leave that for third. So the Bears, I would,
I'm a big Meredith
like
guy.
Meredith.
Yeah.
People like Meredith a lot, but, I struggle with these. Every year I get beat out by these teams that pick off the Merediths of the world. and beat me with him weekly, you know. And I get so frustrated. I'm like, where does Meredith dude come from? And you know, I got to give him some credence. He's probably going to lead the targets. That's a safe pick. But you know, White had 36 targets in 4 games, so I wouldn't sleep on White. You know, he's getting some bad. There was a report out today that White, they had to show White his college tape to remind him of how good he was, because I guess he's losing some confidence, which that really is red flags. Whenever that is coming out in training camp, that's a major red flag. When a wide receiver's got in his head that he's struggling with confidence, I mean, that's a bad thing. That's really not a good sign. But at the same time, I do think he's not elite, but I think he's a decent talent. In the 4 games that he played, he saw a high target share. So don't sleep on Kevin White would be my advice. But we'll pick Meredith for the safe answer on that one. For the Browns, you know, Kenny Britt. How many years are we going to do this to ourselves? Every year we seem like to think that this guy can just do it. I mean, yeah, I think he came close to 1,000 yards or just over 1,000 yards with the dumpster fire that was the Rams. So he's probably the safe answer there. Corey Coleman's getting a lot of bad publicity. I saw a report today that someone, ESPN Cleveland, I think, the guy came out and said that he thinks Ricardo Lewis is going to beat out Corey Coleman, which I'm sure the whole fantasy community just rolled their eyes collectively and said, give me a break. But, you know, you can't ignore that stuff. And if Lewis even doesn't beat him out, just the fact that opinion could enter someone who's following the team, it kind of indicates that maybe Coleman's behind a little bit. And he's dealing with a lot of injuries, so he's probably is slacking a little bit in getting up to speed with the playbook and getting connections on the field and practices. People want to poo-poo practice, but I think it's important for these young receivers to catch on. So Coleman's a sexy pick there, similar to Kevin White would be, but Kenny Britt's probably the safe pick there.
All right, so we got Meredith for the Bears so far, and Britt for the
Meredith
Browns.
for the Bears and Britt. Yeah, and geez, the Rams. Can I pass? Can I? Geez, on this, like, I mean, Tavon Austin is probably the safe answer on that one. That they'll just feed him. I mean, they give him all that money. I couldn't believe how much they gave him in cash. But yeah, I'll go Tavon Austin on that one.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, an interesting name, of course, to mention with the Rams. They got a bunch of rookies. We're not going to assume that they're going to do that that well, obviously, to be the leader in receptions. But how about Robert Woods?
Yeah, I think people liked him in Buffalo. They always hope it would click, but I'm not sure that he's going to lead in targets. I think Tavon Austin's a guy that you could pepper targets, similar to like a Landry, close, low ADOT, close to the line of scrimmage, easy dump off for Goff, newer quarterback trying to make his way. And Woods probably is more of a down the field threat, which takes longer to develop. So, I mean, I can see Woods having these big games where he gets like, 10 game type games where he gets like 3 for 60 and a touchdown. And then people like, hey, look, this is, 16 points, 17 points, whatever it is. So I think Woods can get some exciting games, but I don't think he'll lead in targets.
Gotcha. That's fair. That's definitely fair. The next question is from @2drinkminimum, and he asks, do you think the Dolphins move on from Landry next season?
It's a tough one. It doesn't make any sense why they haven't reached out to him yet. And if they're going to re-up Parker, I think they want to see how good Parker does this year. And if Parker legitimizes himself as a legit receiver in the offense, I think they'll be less likely to have Landry come back. And with that said, I think what makes it difficult is I think Landry's going to want like top, say, 10 money. Mm-hmm. And I think they're not going to pay it.
Right.
So, and they're not going to franchise tag him, which would be, they're going to let him walk. That's hard to believe too. So
I think they just paid Still some money too. So
what am I going to predict in the moment? I'm going to predict that they don't let him walk, that they work something out. Because
gotcha.
I think Landry right now, what's making that hard for him to re-sign, I think Landry wants the money, so he's probably looking for a bigger extension. So, I mean, I've seen some reports that they haven't reached out to him at all for an extension or even to start talks, but I have a hard time believing they don't at least have an idea what Landry would want. And I think Landry at this moment wants a big payday. But once you get to next year, I think there's a lot of UFAs that are going to be out there. I think Watkins will be on the market. There'll be a lot of competition for Landry, and I think Landry will go to test the water and find out that he's not a big fish in that UFA pond. So he probably looks at Stills and says, "Hey, Stills got this kind of money. You give me a break."
Right.
I mean, I'm worth at least double or more than that. So he's probably looking at a lucrative wide receiver market that we just saw last year. Now, if that's going to be going on in next year, it's going to be hard because I think there's going to be a lot more receivers. I think this is a little bit light this year, where there wasn't that much in the pool in terms of bona fide talent. But I think next year that's going to be a little bit higher, and Landry will have a tougher time competing in that market. So ultimately, my call would be that Landry comes back.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. We'll see, though. The next one is from @SBT1030. He asks, do you have a favorite late round quarterback and or tight end this season? You kind of mentioned what's his name earlier. Bortles is kind of a late round guy for you. So let's stray more to the tight end side of things. Do you have a favorite late round tight end that you've been getting for this season?
Yeah, I usually just have a tier of guys, and then whichever one falls to be the cheapest, I grab that one. It feels like Rudolph is always undervalued. I like Rudolph. He's currently going in the 8th round per Fantasy Football Calculator in PPR drafts. That's tight end 9. Zach Ertz, Ebron. Heck, I'd run with Doyle in the 11th round. Cameron Brate would be a shot in the dark. Austin Hooper even later. So maybe give me 3 of those guys depending on your roster. Say like you grab a Rudolph in the 8th, Brate in the 13th, and Hooper in the 14th if you can carry 3 tight ends.
Right.
That would probably be a makeup that I'd look for. And then if I'm gonna wait longer on Rudolph, I'd probably attack like a Ertz or an Ebron, the 10th, 11th round range. And then again, pair him with Brate and Hooper.
Yeah, Rudolph definitely becomes a better value in the leagues that obviously aren't like, giving extra points to tight ends or multiple tight end leagues because, he does go higher in those leagues obviously, but in a regular redraft, PPR league or whatever the case may be, he's a much better value, like you're saying. So it'll be interesting how he does this year. The next question is from @Tim2Fresh, and this is the Washington Redskins running back question again, man. Who do you think is going to get the bulk of the carries there, Kelly or Perrine? P. Ryan, excuse me. I always read it wrong.
Yeah, I'm on Kelly. I think people are diminishing how good of a season he actually had. I mean, he had 3rd most rookie running back yards, I think at 700, which is a solid season. There's nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, other rookie running backs didn't quite hit that. He outrushed Henry,
right.
Derrick Henry. So, I mean, the year he had was decent. I mean, people make fun of him because he was quote unquote fat Rob or whatever. But I think he's slimmed down. He can take care of that. And he's certainly the starter. I can't imagine he's not going to be the starter to start the year. So, and the value right now is flipped. I think Perrine's actually going ahead of him, even in redraft leagues. So, yeah, I'll take the Kelly by late on that one.
I'm actually glad to hear you say that because it seems like, most people have been obviously leaning P. Ryan, since they drafted him. People liked him coming out of college, obviously, and Kelly, they didn't really even know probably coming out of college, but a lot of people are really just, totally giving him no love at all at this point. They're totally leaning the other way, the rookie's way, and they're not really like considering this guy at all at this point. So I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm with you on that.
P-Ran's going 801, RB 36, and then Kelly's down in 10th round, 1008, RB 46. Give me the RB 46, Kelly being the starter, clear starter. I mean, Kelly is going behind Forte, Duke Johnson, Latavius Murray, James White range. And then P. Ryan is going around Kareem Hunt, Gore, that range. I would slide in the 8th round. I'm sliding on running back, and I'll grab Kelly in the 10th.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'm glad to hear you say that. The next question, just trying to move along here, is from @TimeToPivot, and he's saying, is this a season of the older running backs where, they carry a lot of value this season over past seasons? He's just I guess asking, is this a season of the older running back to have more value than usual?
McCoy, DeMarco Murray, Lynch is coming back at age 31, I think. Lynch is up in the 3rd round now as the RB12 behind that great offensive line. Danny Woodhead, another one that's up there in age. Gore a little bit later. I mean, Gore is RB35, a little bit lower, but I think every year you see this where there's 3 to 5 older running backs that just won't die off. But that's coming to an end pretty soon here. I think we had a good run of older running backs the last 10 years or so with Forte, Jamal Charles. Those older guys are starting to fade out now. I expect by this time next year, you're not seeing that many older guys. But this year, we're still going to enjoy the last days of whatever Peterson has left, whatever Forte has left, and guys like that. Woodhead, we'll see whatever they have left. And all those guys are going in the 5th round-ish range.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that because the league is kind of moving in a different direction, it seems, right? I mean, running backs just don't carry the career as long as they used to. It seems like the teams don't seem to care value-wise. They don't care to keep them around too long. It's kind of that one contract that, matters to them. And so I think you're right, man. Some of those guys that we've seen with these longer careers, it won't happen anymore.
I'd agree with that. And just to kind of add to it, I think the other side of it too is that you're seeing a better crop of running backs come in. I mean, I think it was a little dry the last 3 or 4 years where you weren't seeing the crop of running backs come up to actually push those other guys out. So you're getting these mediocre guys that are still getting hung on. Even Lamar Miller, Crowell, these guys that just aren't dominating, they're holding on because nobody really is pushing them out. Even look at Doug Martin in Tampa Bay. Charles Sims was supposed to push him out. That never really happened.
Right.
So now they're still giving Doug Martin a chance. So I think it's just an issue of the running back core that we've been drafting in rookie drafts, and the NFL has been pulling into the NFL, has been a little lagging, So I think as that, next year there's another crop of guys coming up with Chubb and those guys. So I think that you're just seeing a better crop of running backs, younger running backs come up, and that kind of pushes the mediocrity of the running backs out.
That's fair. That makes sense. That's something I hadn't thought about. So yeah, I agree with you on that. The next one is from @BD Duff. He said he has a 3rd pick in a PPR draft, and he's wondering if Zeke does get suspended, and let's say it's 3 games, does he take him still, or does he pass for a guy like AB, for instance? I guess he's kind of more so asking, is there a certain amount of game suspension that you hear and you automatically are going to pass on, or if it's only a certain amount of games, you're like, okay, I don't really care.
Yeah, I go back and forth with this because Bell, even last year, he was missing 3 or 4 games, and he was a league winner last year. So that's a tough one. If you can get a Quiz Rogers or something to just kind of patchwork it for the first 3 games, and then you got a high-end RB that you took. But the other side of it is, if it's 6 games, then you're kind of like, geez, 6 games includes, I don't know when their bye is, but if it includes their bye, you're like, this is half the year, and that really becomes painful. So just on that, hopefully your drafts are later in August, they're not now, and hopefully this clears up before you have your drafts. But If I was having a draft today and I had the third pick, I'd probably go Antonio Brown just because of the safety. Call me chicken bleep, but I'm going AB with my third pick if I had to draft today. But if your drafts, I mean, it's hard to answer that now on August 1st. But
right, but say you did know he had a 3-game suspension. Are you taking him over AB then?
3 games, I'm taking AB.
Okay, you're still taking AB. Okay.
Yeah, and that would be tough. And I could if you make the case to me that you're willing to patchwork it and have a good draft and still be able to patchwork it with like Quiz Rogers or something like that early in the year.
It's not crazy to you then.
That's not crazy. I'm okay with that. But personally, I love Antonio Brown so much that you don't have to bend my arm to take him. So
Right.
I'm okay with that. This is like a good consolation prize if you ask me.
Gotcha. The last one here that I definitely wanted to hit on was from @OBJ13, and he says, name a player whose ADP is too high for you, just out of the bunch that are out there, and a player whose ADP is too low for you. I know we've mentioned a bunch this episode pretty much, but if you just have 2 guys that really stick out to you.
So for a high, I'd say Marshawn Lynch is at 301 RB12. I'm not buying that at all. I mean, I don't know that he can come back from a year off, what kind of shape he's in. He seems like he's been goofing off. I know people are buying into that offensive line that basically it's like Dallas, like anybody can just run behind it and be good, but I can't buy Lynch at 301. That to me seems out of whack. In terms of somebody that's going really low, that's a good one. Let's go with somebody like Frank Gore. 7-11, RB2 in the 7th round. I'll buy that all day. Take him as your RB2, and then you can get some other ones like Riddick in the 7th round. If you get 7th and 8th round, you can get Gore or Riddick. I like those undervalued picks. Pretty good.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right, so that's it for the listener questions that I have right now that I can remember that I really wanted to hit on. I do want to jump over to our foul or no foul, of course, before we close this out, as it's a signature part of the show for me. So, are you ready for some foul or no foul, Kevin?
Let's do it, man.
All right, let's go.
It's that time again. Let's play another round of foul or no foul.
So the first foul or no foul statement that I have, and of course, for anyone who's not familiar, I always want to lay this out because I love people to play along with us. So if you're not familiar with the rules of the game, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw statements at you that I've either picked up around the internet or people have given me or whatever the case may be. And if you agree with the statement that I read to you, then there's no foul. There's no foul in the play. You're not throwing a flag. It's all good. You agree with it. If you, on the other side, if you don't agree with the statement, then there is a foul. So you're throwing the flag, get it out of here. There's a foul on the statement. You do not agree with it. You got it?
Got it.
Okay, cool. So everyone playing at home, you guys got it. All right, so the first one is from @RRuxin. He comes out here with a bold statement, man. Kelvin Benjamin will be a top 15 wide receiver this season in PPR. Foul or no foul?
Foul. No way. I don't see him as top 15.
Not a chance. Where do you see him? How far will you put him?
This is a tough one because these are the kind of players that I'm out completely on, and I don't want them. Somebody's always going to take them where ahead of where I would take them. So right now,
even if you say you were being bold, where would you put him?
Let's see. If I was the last person to draft him, how far would I let him fall? I'm looking through the HP list. Maybe around, I would take Golden Tate, Edelman, Crowder, Snead, all over him. So certainly wide receiver 32 range. Okay. Where like Moncrief, Sanders, Garcon are going. It might be that range.
Right.
Yeah, I would say between wide receiver 32 and 36.
Gotcha. So sorry, Ruxin. You're out. You're way out of the ballpark with Kevin.
Top 15 is tight, man. I mean, you're talking like Pryor, Keenan Allen, DT, Hopkins, Cooks, Baldwin, all in the 11 to 15 range.
Yeah.
I mean, even that's like even outside looking in of that range is Watkins, Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffrey, Landry, Adams, Martavis Bryant. I mean, that's a serious list right there. I mean,
Yeah, and even
people
me,
forget how crowded they are.
yeah, even me, I'm a big Kelvin Benjamin fan. Like, I'm just a believer in the guy, and I just think he has the skills to translate. But I wouldn't put him in the top 15 either. I would say if I was trying to be bold and pushing it, I would say like top 20 or something. Just pushing it. But realistically, he'll probably fall to me in the 25-ish range. But that's, again, I'm a big fan of him.
So and I think just to point out real quick on these, I like to remind people. I think what happens is you like a wide receiver and you're like, hey, yeah, I think he could be a top 24 wide receiver.
Right.
But the thing is, what you really got to do is sit down, even if you don't rank people, if you just, I would do this for myself in a regular home redraft league.
Right.
Go out and list, even players you don't like, go look at the top 30 wide receivers and list them down, like write them on a piece of paper, look at them, and then tell yourself which ones do you think fall out of the top 24 that you're going to put one that's outside top 24 into the top 24, because there's just too many wide receivers. It's really saturated if you look at it. I mean, there's a lot of good receivers in the NFL right now, and it's just hard. The top 30 are really good. I mean, even if you put like Willie Snead is wide receiver 29 in ADP, and that's sick. I mean, that's sick.
Yeah, that's crazy. And of course, this is the reason why people, sometimes draft wide receivers later and, try to get those running backs early is because, like you're saying, you're talking 30 guys back and you're like, there's still sick wide receivers there,
That's right.
So it's an interesting thing, man. But we'll see how KB plays out. Obviously, KB, there's people on both sides. Some people will really hate Kelvin Benjamin and some people will like the guy. So we'll see what happens.
And last thing on KB is I even try to keep the weight thing out of it. Like, there was a report today he came into camp at 243, that's an outlier weight-wise for a wide receiver. I mean, that's like Calvin Johnson, and I was looking up like David Boston. I think those are the two comps that you can have for weight at 6'5", 240 plus. He's an outlier at that weight. He's got to probably bring that down a little bit to 230 or so. But even keeping that aside, it's just look at how many wide receivers he's got to compete with for that, especially top 15.
Right. And I definitely agree. That's good. The next one is the next statement we have here is Terrence West will have a better season than Doug Martin in points per carry scoring. Foul or no foul?
Yeah, foul on that one. I got Doug Martin, even in a shorter. I mean, he's going to miss 3 games, but I don't think Terrence West is good enough to even stem off Buck Allen.
So even with Dixon out for the year and Doug Martin,
with Dixon out, the
camp reports and everything.
Yeah, I like Woodhead to do that role. I think he can do it, and I don't think they could pass freaking 600 times, that team.
Right.
That they love to throw the ball, and they'll just have Woodhead in there. I mean, if they think about it in football standpoint, if they take Woodhead off the field for Terrence West, they deserve to lose. I mean, that's just a bad, value play. I mean, it's just, you shouldn't do that. I mean, there's no reason why they should do that. And the only chance that Terrence West has is that Roman, I think they hired Roman as a rushing specialist coach kind of thing. If he has any say and they actually start to run the ball, which they should not do, then yeah, I can't see it. I can't see West doing much more than like 700 yards kind of season. And I think Doug Martin can have some winning weeks. I mean, maybe season total, it'll even out between him and West if West plays 15, 16 games. But I think Martin can be week winner. I think Martin could have, 20-point weeks where he hits those ceilings for you, and at his ADP, he's winning you weeks as he'll give you like RB2 type weeks. And certainly doesn't come at that cost. So, yeah, I'm in on Martin on that one.
All right, I'm a big Martin fan too. So again, we're on the same page on that one. The next one, again, another big wide receiver, but this guy carrying a lot of hype, lots of great videos coming out of course at training camp on a new team. Terrell Pryor will finish in the top 15 wide receivers in PPR this upcoming season. Foul or no foul?
Foul. Yeah, I'm not that high on Pryor. I think right now he's going as wide receiver 16. I could easily see Watkins, Allen Robinson, Jeffrey, Landry finishing ahead of him. So not much wiggle room there. I think Pryor could be top 24, but I don't see him as top 15.
Okay. And do you see the move to Washington being a bad thing for him or a good thing?
I think a good thing. I mean, he'll probably lose targets in Cleveland offense. They were feeding him. He was doing really well, and he was the only true option to get
he was
thrown
getting
to.
fed like
So
crazy.
he got fed like crazy with like 140 targets. Some people cite his low yak, but he was probably just catching the ball downfield and then not getting yak after his long catches. So I'm fine with that. I'm fine with his yak being a little bit lower, but I don't think he sees 140 targets in Washington. So I think that limits him a little bit. I think for a wide receiver 1, you really have to hit 135 targets is usually my threshold that I like to see, and I don't think he hits that. So he's probably looking at a 110 to 125 range for targets, and then you kind of have to backtrack to, can he improve his efficiency, his catch rate kind of thing, which I don't think that's a quarterback issue. I think that he's more of going to be of a deep threat, and I think that his catch rate could still stay sub 60%. So you're talking about a lower efficiency, and I think that kind of holds him back a little bit. And then even outside of Reed, I think that between Doxson emerging and Crowder being there, I think they'll all split those targets pretty evenly. Even if they get 100 apiece, I think it limits Pryor's upside.
Gotcha. Fair points.
The touchdowns might be there, though. The touchdowns might be there. So that touchdown variance is where, if I'm going to be wrong about Pryor, that's where I'll be wrong. Is that Crowder, Reed, they don't get the touchdowns, and Cousins have a red zone connection with Pryor. That's where, if I'm going to be wrong on Pryor, that's where I'll be wrong. Is that his touchdowns exceed 6, 7, 8 range, where I would put it sub 6.
Right, and obviously a big factor in that would be Reed if he's hurt or whatever the case may be. So that would obviously change things dramatically. The last one here that I have, yes, the last one that I have. This one is a bold statement, man. I trust Mike Gillislee over Todd Gurley. Foul or no foul?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. You're asking a Patriots fan this question?
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna revoke my Patriots card for this one, man. So you trust Gillislee? So I'll say foul, man. I could not.
I know it hurts you to say that, Kevin.
Scenario. I could never envision a scenario with Gurley on talent alone. I mean, they gotta fix him. I mean, he's gonna get force-fed carries, and yeah, I see positive regression for Gurley. I'm not that I'm a buyer on Gurley. I mean, he's got a much higher cost than Gillislee, but at the same time, I'm trusting that Gurley's talent is going to be force-fed, and that volume is something I want. So I'm going there. And Gillislee, the risk is lower volume, but he's going to have higher touchdown upside. That I certainly don't expect 18 touchdowns like Blunt had. But even if he's at 12 touchdowns, then it really excels him into the RB1 category, where Gurley could finish in the, RB2, RB15 kind of range. So there is potential. And I can see, where the question would come from. I think it's a good one because Gillislee, that's what makes it so hard, right? And that's why it's a good question, because Gillislee's touchdown upside definitely can outpace what Gurley will get volume yard-wise. And Gurley's ceiling hasn't been that high. I think it's some ridiculous season and a half. He hasn't had a game over 100 yards. So, and Rams, are they going to score many touchdowns? Probably not. So his upside seems limited, but at the same time, if they can fix that offensive line and Goff is capable, I think Gurley had like 10 touchdowns in his rookie year. Yeah. So I'm going Gurley. I think foul, but at the same time, I can give credence to why you'd ask that kind of a question. Certainly, Gillislee could, Blunt finished what, RB 8-ish range with 18 touchdowns and, almost 300 carries. I think he finished with 299 carries in the Patriots offense. So that kind of volume can't be ignored. If Gillislee can repeat that or even get 75% of that volume and that touchdown, then certainly he could. You can envision a scenario where it does happen,
Yeah.
but man, there's just like at this point, it's like I'm leaning on Gurley's talent way too hard.
Yeah, hey, we had to get bold here on Fantasy Football Foul or No Foul, man. It's just a part of the game. But I figured, we got a guy like Gurley who, people obviously they all believe in his talent, but they're so down on the Rams and how they use him and the offense. And you got a guy like Gillislee who, he lands on the Patriots and he's all the rage right now. And, like you said, you mentioned the carries that, were left behind by Blunt and all these things. So I was curious what you would say. And obviously being a Patriot fan, I had to, push you a little bit, man. Well, Kevin, I do want to thank you for coming on. Obviously, we went through the gamut here. We talked about your podcast. We talked about, the questions here from the listeners. We did some foul or no foul. We dug in deep on fantasy football. So I do appreciate, you spending that time with me and, giving the listeners some good advice here. For the listeners, where can they find you? How can they support your content? How can they find you if they want to ask you questions and get involved with you? Where do they go?
So you can find my work on dynastyleaguefootball.com. Find me on Twitter, _FF Engineer, _FF_engineer on Twitter. Best place is always Twitter, man.
Okay.
Anybody can get on Twitter and find myself there.
Okay, and where do they find the podcast again?
The podcast can be iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Play. It's everywhere, man.
Okay. And just so they hear the title of it again, the title when if they're looking for it on iTunes, for instance, what are they searching for?
Fantasy Football Engineering.
Fantasy Football Engineering. Okay, I highly recommend you guys go there, subscribe to that. Leave Kevin a review too, man. It helps out. And again, man, thank you for coming on. I always do like to ask our guests to leave our listeners with a final piece of advice or a message of any sort at all. It doesn't have to be fantasy football if you don't want it to be. It could be anything. What would you leave our listeners with, man?
Let's go. It's draft season, so I'm going to leave you guys with some draft tips. Know your tiers. Some people, they look at a list of players going into a draft, but I really recommend you having tiers and look at runs. So if you're looking at maybe the top 8 or so running backs in your draft and you want to make sure you get one of those, keep an eye on that. Make sure you know your tiers. The top 8 running backs, the top, say, 12, 15 wide receivers for your wide receiver 1. Know your tiers and know where those drop off. And before you go into your draft, make sure you're prepared and be prepared that there's a pretty big, wide receiver 3 pool out there this year. So, you may want to make sure that you're able to wait there a little bit if you want to. So just know your tiers going into your draft. I think that's a safe bet to a good piece of knowledge there.
Know your tiers. You heard it from Kevin. Know your tiers. I appreciate it again, man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
No problem. Absolutely. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Kevin, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It was an honor to have you on here. Great to have a conversation with you. Smart guy, man. I know you guys took some notes from him there. Again, if you want to follow up this conversation with him on Twitter, or if you want to thank him for coming on the podcast, tell him to come back on, whatever the case may be, you can hit him up at _FF_engineer. See, he throws a bunch of underscores in there, try to throw you off to see if, you're quick, if you're smart enough to get it. And if you get it, you're allowed to talk to him. Nah, seriously, you guys know when it comes to people on this podcast, I make sure that people who come on are ones that interact with people. They're not too big, to respond to you. So Kevin is one of those guys. He's a good dude. We only fuck with people who fuck with people, if that makes sense. Good people, right? That's what we do here. So shout out to Kevin again for coming to the show. Guys, don't forget, the Clock Dodgers podcast is officially sponsored by No Halftime. I will have more details to follow. If you are in the Charity Ring League, you'll be getting an email from me soon. You will know, and we'll get that bad boy rolling. Also, if you're not subscribed to the podcast, if you listen to this podcast today and you're like, damn, this is the first episode I ever listened to, this was amazing, or this is the 63rd episode I've ever listened to, am I not subscribed to this thing? Am I just streaming it when it comes on? No. Hit the subscribe button. It's super beneficial to us. Also, if you can leave a review, that is so nice of you. We really appreciate it. To everyone that's already left reviews, thank you. I will say, however, we got a gift recently from a listener. We were gifted something by a listener. I'll get into more details on that as well, but let's just say there's gonna be some favors that I ask of you, right? Maybe it's to retweet something, to follow on Twitter, to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, something fun, right? Something not too hard. And then your name will be entered into a drawing to win something very cool. And again, this gift was given to us by a listener. Those are my favorite gifts. Whenever I get gifts from listeners and people who are part of the Clock Dodger family and just want to, to give back something or to provide something that will help build what we're doing here, just to make things a little fun, I love that. So we'll talk about it a little more. It just came in, so as I get that thing squared away, I'll let you know, and you'll know about it. Just so kind of hang with me for a second, because there's some fun details for that. Other than that, guys, those are the major things I wanted to tell you about. Of course, as always, visit clockdodgers.com. Yes, we have an official website. It's clockdodgers.com. If you're not already checking it out, I don't know what you're doing, because we're not just your regular podcast. We're not just your regular website. We got some different stuff going on here, some unique stuff, and I love the guys who contribute to clockdodgers.com. Guys like Tyler, Josh, Jason, Swag, Nick, so many cool guys, right? Ace, you guys know him as Ace, Tim, Eddie, there's so many guys, and I don't want to leave anybody off. I'm trying to, Christo, there's just so many guys that have been contributing lately. It's a lot of fun. And if you're interested in contributing, hit me up. Follow me at Clock Dodgers on all social media platforms, or just send me an email, clockdodgers@gmail.com, and we'll get it talking right then and there. Otherwise, you guys know where to find me. You know what it is. I appreciate the love and support as always. If there's any reason you want to hit me out, just hit me up. We'll talk. We'll chit chat. We'll make something happen. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, hit us up. Anything at all, just hit me up. All the lines are open. All the lines are open, as they say. They're ringing off the hook. They're all open. So just hit me up, guys. Again, it was cool. This chat with Kevin was great. Be on the lookout for a lot more content. The football season's about to kick off. You're about to realize that you need to be locked into Clock Dodgers, right? The whole off season, we fed you. We fed you with great content. I'm talking about just for the fantasy football people here. Just for fantasy football, the whole offseason, we fed you with content. I mean, if you haven't been subscribed this whole time, go back and check it out. Those things aren't over, they're not like past due where they're not good anymore. They're not expired. Go back and check out those episodes. There's a lot of good stuff on there you're going to miss out if you don't check it out. But going forward, it's only going to get more intense. A lot of fun stuff lined up as far as that is concerned. Of course, even on the non-fantasy side of things, a lot of fun stuff. Lots of fun stuff in all aspects here. So just stay tuned, guys. Please subscribe to the podcast, because that's how you get the stuff first. Follow us on social media. That's how you get stuff first. That's how you get to interact with the contests and the games and all the other stuff that we're doing, that we're building here. Clock Dodger family, I love you guys. As always, be kind, be great, keep dodging.
Visit clockdodgers.com for more unique content. Connect with us now by following at Clock Dodgers on Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope.